Hello, I'm reading Paradise Lost by Milton. This is a reprinting from photocopied pages from the first edition. Paradise Lost, Book 1. Of man's first disobedience, and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taft brought death into the world, and all our woe. With loss of Eden, to one greater man restore us, and regain the blissful seat. Sing heavenly muse that on the secret top of Oreb and of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and the earth rose out of chaos. Or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no little flight intends to soar above. Above the Ionian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose or rhyme, and chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure. Instruct me, for thou knowest thou from the first wast present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove like fast brooding on the vast abyss, and amidst it pregnant. What in me is dark, illuminate. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument I may assert the eternal providence, and justify the ways of God to men. Say first, for heaven hides nothing from thy view, nor the deep tract of hell. Say first what cause moved our grandparents in that happy state, favored of heaven so highly, to fall off from their Creator, and transgress his will for one restraint, lords of the world besides, who first seduced them to that foul revolt. The infernal servant he it was, whose guile stirred up with envy and revenge, deceived the mother of mankind, what time his pride had cast him out from heaven, with all his host of rebel angels, by whose aid aspiring to set himself in glory above his peers, he trusted to have equal to the Most High. If he opposed with ambitious aim against the throne and monarchy of God, raised impious war in heaven and battle proud with vain attempt, him the almighty power hurled headlong flaming from the eternal sky, with hideous ruin and combustion down to bottomless perdition there to dwell, in adamantine chains and penal fire, who durst defy the omnipotent to arms, 9 times the space that measures day and night to mortal men, he with his horrid crew lay vanquished, howling, rowling in the firing gulf, confounded though immortal, but his doom reserved him to more wrath, for now the thought both of lost happiness and lasting pain torments him. Round he throws his baleful eyes, that witnessed huge affliction and dismay, mixed with obdurate pride and steadfast hate. At once, as far as angels can, he views the dismal situation, waste and wild, a dungeon horrible, on all sides browned, as one great furnace flamed, yet from those flames no light, but rather darkness visible, served only to discover fights of woe, regions of sorrow, doleful shades, where peace and rest can never dwell, hope never comes that comes to all, but torture without end still urges in a fiery deluge, fed with ever-burning sulphur consumed. Such place eternal justice had prepared for those rebellious. Here their prison ordained, in utter darkness, and their portion set, as far removed from God and light of heaven, as from the center thrice to the utmost pole. Oh, how unlike the place from whence they fell! There the companions of his fall, o'erwhelmed with floods and whirlwinds of tempestuous fire, he soon discerns, and weltering by his side, one next himself in power and next in crime, long after known in Palestine, and named Beelzebub, to whom the arch-enemy, and thence in heaven called Satan, with bold words breaking the horrid silence, thus began: If thou beest he, but how fallen, how changed from him, who in the happy realms of light, clothed with transcendent brightness, didst outshine myriads though bright, if he, whom mutual league, united thoughts and counsels, equal hope, and hazard in the glorious enterprise, joined with me once, now misery hath joined in equal ruin. Into what pit thou feelt from him, what height fallen, so much the stronger proved he with his thunder, until then who knew the force of those dire arms, yet not for those, nor what the potent victor in his rage can else inflict, do I repent or change, though changed in outward lustre, that fixed mind in high disdain from sense of injured merit, that with the mightiest raised me to contend, and to the fierce contention brought along innumerable force of spirits armed, that durst dislike his reign, and me preferring his utmost power with adverse power opposed, in dubious battle on the plains of heaven, and shook his throne. What though the field be lost? All is not lost. Oh, field be lost. All is not lost. The unconquerable will, and steady of revenge, immortal hate, and courage, never to submit or yield. And what else not to be overcome? That glory never shall his wrath or might extort from me. To bow and sue for grace with suppliant knee, and defy? It could be defy. Defy his power, who from the terror of this arm so late doubted his empire, that were low indeed, that were an ignominy, and shame beneath this downfall, since by fate the strength of gods in this imperial substance cannot fail, since though experience of this great event in arms not worse, and foresight much advanced, we may with more successful hope resolve to wage by force or guile eternal war, irreconcilable to our grand foe, who now triumphs, and in the excess of joy, sole reigning, holds the tyranny of heaven. So spake the apostate angel, though in pain, vaunting aloud, but racked with deep despair, and him thus answered soon his bold compeer: O Prince, O Chief of many-throned powers, what led the embattled seraphim to war under thy conduct, and in dreadful deeds, fearless, endangered heaven's perpetual king, and put to proof his high supremacy, whether upheld by strength or chance or fate, too well I see and rue the dire event, that with sad overthrow and foul defeat hath lost us heaven, and all this mighty host, and horrible destruction laid thus low, as far as gods and heavenly essences can perish. For the mind and spirit remains invincible, and vigor soon returns. Though all our glory extinct and happy state, here swallowed up in endless misery. But what if he, our conqueror, whom I now of force believe almighty, since no less than such could have overpowered such force as ours, have left us this spirit and strength entire, strongly to suffer and support our pains, that we may so suffice his vengeful ire, or do him mightier service as his thralls by right of war, whate'er his business be, here in the heart of hell to work in fire, or do his errands in the gloomy deep. What can it then avail, though yet we feel strength's undiminished, or eternal being to undergo eternal punishment. Whereto, with speedy words, the archfiend replied, Fallen cherubi, to be weak is miserable, doing or suffering. But of this be sure, to do aught good never will be our task, but ever to do ill our sole delight, as being the contrary to his high will whom we resist. If then his providence out of our evil seek to bring forth good, our labor must be to pervert that end, and out of good still to find means of evil, which oft times may succeed, so as perhaps shall grieve him if I fail not, and disturb his inmost counsels from their destined aim. But see, the angry victor hath recalled his ministers of vengeance in pursuit back to the gates of heaven. The sulphurous hail shot after us in storm, or blown hath laid the fiery surge that from the precipice of heaven received us falling, and the thunder, winged with red lightning and impetuous rage, perhaps hath spent his shafts, and ceases now to bellow through the vast and boundless deep. Let us not flip the occasion, or ever scorn, or satiate fury yield it from our foe. Seest thou yon dreary plain, forlorn and wild, the feet of desolation, void of light, save what the glimmering of these livid flames casts pale and dreadful? Thither let us tend from off the tossing of these fiery waves, there rest, if any rest can harbor there, and reassembling our afflicted powers, consult how we may henceforth most offend our enemy, our own loss now repair, how overcome this dire calamity, what reinforcement we may gain from hope, if not what resolution from despair. Thus Satan, talking to his nearest mate, with head uplift above the wave, and eyes that sparkling blazed, his other parts besides, prone on the flood, extended long and large, lay floating many a rood, in bulk as huge as whom the fables name of monstrous size, Titanian or earthborn, that warred on Jove, Briareos, or Typhon, whom the den by ancient Tarsus held. Tartus? Or that sea beast Leviathan, which God of all his works created hugest, that swim in the ocean stream, him haply flumbering on the Norway foam, the pilot of some small night foundered skiff, deeming some island oft as seamen tell, with fixed anchor in his scaly rind, moors by his side under the lee, while night invests the sea and wished morn delays. So stretched out huge in length the archfiend lay, chained on the burning lake, nor ever thence had risen or heaved his head, but that the will and high permission of all-ruling heaven left him at large to his own dark designs, that with reiterated crimes he might heap on himself damnation, while he sought evil to others, and enraged might see how all his malice served but to bring forth infinite goodness, grace, and mercy, shewn on man by him seduct, but on himself trouble, confusion, wrath, and vengeance poured. Forthwith upright he rears from off the pool his mighty stature, on each hand the flames driven backward slope their pointing spires, and rowled in billows, leave i' the mist of a horrid veil, in the mist. Then with expanded wings he steers his flight aloft, incumbent on the dusky air that felt unusual weight, till on dry land he lights, if it were land that ever burned with solid, as a lake with liquid fire, and such appeared in hue as when the force of subterranean wind transports a hill torn from Pelorus, or the shattered side of thundering Aetna, whose combustible and fueled entrails thence conceiving fire, sublimed with mineral fury, aid the winds, and leave a singed bottom all involved with stench and smoke. Such resting found the soul of unblessed feet. Him followed his next mate, both glorying to have escaped the Stygian flood as gods, and by their own recovered strength, not by the sufferance of supernal power. Is this region, this the soil, the clime, said then the aloft archangel, this the feet that we must change for heaven, this mournful for that celestial light? Be it so, since he, gloom, who is now sovereign, can dispose and bid what shall be right. Farthest from him is best whom reason hath equalled, force hath made so above his equals. Farewell, happy fields, prime, where joy forever dwells. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and thou, profoundest hell, receive thy new proceder. One who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. The mind is its own place, and in it self can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater? Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here may reign secure, and in my choice to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But wherefore let we then our faithful friends, the associates and co-partners of our loss, lie thus astonished on the oblivious pool, and call them not to share with us their part in this unhappy mansion, or once more, with rallied arms to try what may be yet regained in heaven, or what more lost in hell. So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered, leader of those armies bright, which but the omnipotent none could have foiled. If once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope and fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged, and all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie groveling and prostrate on yon lake of fire. As we erewhile, astounded and amazed, no wonder, fallen such a pernicious height. He scarce had ceased when the superior fiend was moving toward the shore, his ponderous shield, ethereal temper, massy, large, and round. Behind him cast the broad circumference hung on his shoulders like the moon, whose orb, through optic glass, the Tolkien artist views as at evening from the top of Fessel, or in Valdarno, to descry new lands, rivers or mountains in her spotty globe. His spear, to equal which the tallest pine hewn on Norwegian hills, to be the mast of some great admiral, or but a wand, he walked with to support uneasy steps over the burning marl, not like those steps on heaven's azure, and the torrid clime. Smoke on him sore besides, vaulted with fire. Nathless he so endured, till on the beach of that inflamed sea he stood and called his legions, angel forms, who lay entranced, thick as autumnal leaves that strew the brooks, and Valum Brofa, where the Etrurian shades, high overarched embower, or scattered sedge afloat, when with fierce winds Orion armed hath vexed the Red Sea coast, whose waves o'er Bifurus and his Memphian chivalry, through while with perfidious hatred they pursued the sojourners of Goshen, who beheld from the fate shore their floating carcasses and broken chariot wheels, to thick Patron abject, and aloft lay these, covering the flood, under amazement of their hideous change. He called so loud that all the hollow deep of hell resounded, Princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, once yours, now lost, if such astonishment as this can seize eternal spirits, or have ye chosen this place, after the toil of battle, to repose your wearied virtue? For the ease you find to slumber here, as in the vales of heaven? Or in this abject posture have ye sworn to adore the conqueror, who now beholds Cheruba and Seraph rowling in the flood, with scattered arms and ensigns, till anon his swift pursuers from heaven gates discern the advantage, and ascending tread us down, thus drooping, or with linked thunderbolts transfix us to the bottom of this gulf. Awake, arise, or be forever fallen. They heard and were abashed, and up they sprung upon the wing, and when men wont to watch on duty, sleeping found by whom they dread, rouse and bestir themselves ere well awake. Nor did they perceive the evil plight in which they were, or the fierce pains not feel. Yet to their general's voice they soon obeyed innumerable, as when the potent rod of Ammon's son in Egypt's evil day waved round the coast, up called a pitchy cloud of locusts, warping on the eastern wind, that o'er the realm of an impious Pharaoh hung like night, darkened all the land of Nile. So numberless were those bad angels seen, hovering on wing under the cope of hell, twixt upper, nether, and surrounding fires, till as a signal given, the uplifted spear of the great Sultan waving to direct their course, even in balance down they light on the firm brimstone, and fill all the plain, a multitude, like which the populous north poured never from her frozen loins, to pass serene o'er the Danaa, when her barbarous sons came like a deluge on the south, and spread beneath Gilpatrar to the Libyan sands. Forthwith, from every squadron and each band, the heads and leaders thither hast where stood their commander, godlike shapes and forms excelling human, princely dignities and powers, that erst in heaven sat on thrones, though of their names and heavenly records now be no memorial, blotted out and erased by their rebellion from the books of life. Nor had they yet among the sons of Eve got them new names, till wandering o'er the earth through God's high sufferance for the trial of man by falsities and lies, the greatest part of mankind they corrupted to forsake God their Creator, and the invisible glory of him that made them, to transform oft to the image of a brute, adorned with gay religions full of pomp and gold, and devils to adore for deities. Then were they known to men by various names, and various idols through the heathen world. Say, Muse, their names then known, who roused from the slumber on that fiery couch, last at their great emperor's call, as next in worth came singly where he stood on the bare strand, while the promiscuous crowd stood yet aloof. The chief were those who from the pit of hell, roaming to seek their prey on earth, durst fix their seats long after the next seat of God, their altars by his altar, gods adored among the nations round, and durst abide Jehovah thundering out of Zion, throned between his cherubim. yea, often placed within his sanctuary, itself their shrines, abominations, and with curled things his holy rites and solemn feats profaned, and with their darkness durst affront his light. First Moloch, horrid king, besmeared with blood of human sacrifice, and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unheard, that passed through fire to his grim idol. Him the Ammonite worshipped in Rabbah and her weary plain, in Argob and in Bathan, to the stream of utmost Arnon. Nor content with such audacious neighborhood, the wisest heart of Solomon he led by fraud to build his temple right against the temple of God on that opprobrious hill, and made his grove the pleasant valley of Hinnom Tophet, thence and black Gehenna called the type of hell. Next Chemos, the obscene dread of Moab's sons, from Aror to Nebo, and the wild of southmost Abarim, and Hesebon, and Heronium, Scon's realm beyond the flowery dale of Sibma, clad with vines, and Alil to Asphaltic pool. Peor, his other name, when he enticed Israel and Siddim on their march from Nile, to do him wanton rites, which cost them woe. Yet thence his lustful orgies he enlarged even to that hill of scandal by the grove of Moloch homicide. Lust hard by hate, till good Josiah drove them thence to hell. With these came they who from the bordering blood of old Euphrates to the brook that parts Egypt from Syrian ground, had general names of Baalim and Ashtaroth, those male, these female. For spirits, when they please, can either sex assume or both. So soft and uncompounded is their essence pure, not tid or mingled with joint or limb, nor founded on the brittle strength of bones, like cumbrous flesh, but in what shape they choose, dilated or condensed, bright or obscure, can execute their airy purposes, and works of love and or enmity fulfill. For those the race of Israel oft forlook, their living strength and unfrequented left his righteous altar, bowing lowly down to bestial gods, for which their heads as low bowed down in battle, sunk before the spear of despicable foes. With these in troop came Ashtoreth, whom the Phoenicians called Astarte, queen of heaven, with crescent horns, to hold bright image nightly by the moon. Sidonian virgins paid their vows in songs, and Sion also not unsung, where stood her temple on the offensive mountain, built by that uxorious king, whose heart, though large, beguiled by fair adulteresses, fell to idols foul. Famous came next behind, whose annual wound in Lebanon allured the Syrian damsels to lament his fate, and amorous ditties all a summer's day, while smooth Adonis from his native rock ran purple to the sea, supposed with blood of famous, yearly wounded. The love tale infected Sion's daughters with like heat, whose wanton passions in the sacred porch Ezekiel saw, when by the vision led his eye surveyed the dark idolatries of alienated Judah. Next came one who mourned in earnest when the captive ark maimed his brute image. Head and hands lopped off in his own temple, on the Grunzel edge where he fell flat and shamed his worshippers. Dagon his name, sea monster. Upward, man, and downward, fish, yet had his temple high, reared in Azotus. dreaded through the coast of Palestine in Gath and Ascalon, in Acharon and Gaza's frontier bounds. Him followed Rimmon, whose delightful seat was fair Damascus, on the fertile banks of Abana and Pharphar, lucid streams. He also against the house of God was bold. A leper once he lost and gained a king. Ahaz, his foppish conqueror, whom he drew God's altar to disparage and displace for one of Syrian mode, whereon to burn his odious offsprings and adore the gods whom he had vanquished. And these appeared a crew under whose names of old renown, Osiris, Iris, and Horus in their train, with monstrous shapes and sorceries, a bust, fanatic Egypt and her priests to seek, their wandering gods disguised in brutish forms rather than human. Nor did Israel escape the infection when their borrowed gold composed the calf in Oreb, and the rebel king doubled that sin in Bethel and in Dan, likening his maker to the grazed ox, Jehovah, who in one night when he passed from Egypt marching, equaled with one stroke both her firstborn and all her bleating gods. Belial came last. Then whom a spirit more lewd fell not from heaven, or more gross, to love vice for itself. To him no temple stood or altar smoked, yet who more oft than he in temples and at altars when the priest turns atheist, as did Eli's sons, who filled with lust and violence the house of God, and courts and palaces he also reigns, and in luxurious cities, when the noise of riot ascends above their loftiest towers, and injury and outrage, and when night darkens the streets, then wander forth the sons of Belial, flown with insolence and wine, witness the streets of Sodom, and that night in Gibeah, when hospital doors yielded their matrons to prevent worse rape. These were the prime, in order and in might. The rest were long to tell, though far renowned. The Ionian gods, of Javan's issue held gods. Yet, confessed later than heaven and earth, their boasted parents, Tidon, heaven's firstborn with his enormous brood, and birthright feased his by younger Saturn, he from mightier Job, his own and Rhea's son, like measure found. So Job usurping reigned. These first in Crete and Ida, known thence on the snowy top of cold Olympus, ruled the middle air, their highest heaven, or on the Delphian cliff, or in Dodona, and through all the bounds of Doric land, or who with Saturn old fled over Adria to the Hesperian fields, and o'er the Celtic roamed the utmost isles. All these and more came flocking, but with looks downcast and damp, yet such wherein appeared obscure some glimpse of joy, to have found their chief, not in despair, to have found themselves not lost in loss itself, which on his countenance cast like doubtful hue, but he his wanted pride, soon recollecting with high words that bore semblance of worth not substance, gently raised their fainted courage and dispelled their fears. I'm at line 531. Book 1 ends at line about 800. I'm going to stop here.